There was 15 laws sitting on the governor's desk that would impact landlords like you. Which ones got signed into law? Which ones got vetoed? This is a 3-part series breaking apart the newest laws that impact California landlords. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Chris German, and welcome back to the Apartment Dealer Show. With us today, we have Mr. Mike Brennan, Eviction Attorney Extraordinaire, and the topic of the day is all the bills that were signed into law that impact you as a landlord. You're not going to be happy, and so that's why we're here breaking down all the information. This is a 3-part series. First, we're going to start with live footage from my most recent Apartment Owners Educational Luncheon. This is where myself, a host of speakers, and about 200 or so multifamily investors convene on a location, and we discuss what are the most recent changes when it comes to multifamily ownership. For today's video, we're going to be discussing the laws. What laws were proposed? What are the emerging trends? Mike Brennan is going to break down for us. Well, if you encapsulate what's taken place since COVID, the changes to the laws, even leading up to COVID, and what's on the dream list of the legislatures in terms of what they would like to see passed and what are the trends that are emerging, it's very telling. You need this information because it's going to impact you, your peace of mind, and your financial, no matter which way you cut it. So let's start here. Let's go now to that live footage from our most recent educational event.
Hi, everybody. So if you thought Gil was being harsh, you're not going to like me today. I'm going to go over some trends with you, really. I'm going to talk a little bit about a lot of the laws many of you know, and just let me give a little background real quick to extrapolate on what Deepan just said. My background is that I was a history major and a political science major at UCLA. After I got out, when I was in college learning that stuff, it didn't really mean a lot to me. When I got out of law school, I went into commercial real estate initially before I got my license. And it was only after I became a licensed attorney and ended up on the board of directors and ended up sitting on the legislative committees that I started to understand the benefit of being a history major and a political science major. And so what I'm going to talk about today, many of you know, some of you don't know, the legislative session in California just ended. And there are a lot of potential laws sitting on Governor Newsom's desk right now, and he has until sometime in the middle of October to sign them into law or to veto them. I'm going to start off today by telling you about a few of the laws that could impact your investments, and then I'm going to move into some trends that will certainly impact your investments. And before I get started, I want to just say, some of you in this room today really should not be an investor. You should not be a real estate investor. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. You may walk, like Gil said, I'm going to tell you some stuff that may be difficult for you guys to hear, but it's designed to help you decide, do I really want to stay in this? Do I really want to be a residential rental owner in California? And I used to own rentals here, my wife and I. My wife's family's owned rentals. My parents have owned rentals. And we currently own nothing in California. And after I talk to you a little bit today, hopefully you'll understand why. So let's jump into the new laws. And if you have the ability to take some notes, I would write these down so you could do a little bit of research on them. Like I said, these passed the legislatures, but they have not been signed by the governor now yet. My guess is that every one of these that I'm about to talk to you about will be signed, and they will go into effect in January of 2024. So right off the bat, we'll talk about AB 12. AB 12 is a security deposit law. And that says that you are no longer allowed to collect more than 1 month's rent as a security deposit. So I want you to think about that for a second. Any of you who have owned property for a while and had to turn over a unit after a tenant has vacated will know that 1 month's security deposit will not cover it. It will barely cover it. And also, let me take a moment to talk about the actual social impact that this law is going to have. How many of you look at FICO scores when you decide on an applicant? Most of you, right? And how many of you have ever taken a higher security deposit because the FICO score or the credit report was not as good as you want it to be, right? Many of you, right? You just got your knees chopped off, right? You can no longer take more than a month's rent as security deposit. So the impact that's going to have is that many of you are going to look at a person who's on the fence. I want a 680 FICO score, and this person has a 650. Under normal circumstances, I could have looked up and said, look, if you give me 2 months security deposit, I'll make an exception. Am I going to do that now? Probably not. Why? Because I don't have any security anymore. So there's going to be a negative impact. That's actually going to work a detriment to the tenants, even though the purpose behind the law was stated to be that, hey, people can't afford 2 months security, et cetera. So anyway, that's AB 12, limits on security deposits. SB 567, that is a significant restriction on the Ellis Act and increased limitations on the Ellis Act. And if you don't know what the Ellis Act is a law that allows you to go out of business. So let's say some of you in the room probably own single-family homes as a rental. And you say, well, you know what? I want my son or my daughter or my grandkids to live in that property. I don't want to rent that property anymore. You have the right to go out of business on that property. And that's under the Ellis Act. And this new law is a severe restriction on the Ellis Act. They're going to make it very difficult for you to decide to pull a rental unit off. Another way this takes place a lot is you have, let's say, a 10-plex, a 10-unit building. Well, real estate investors are generally pretty smart people. When problems arise in the rental market, it's not unheard of for somebody to say, you know what? I don't want apartments. I'm going to subdivide that, turn all of these into condos, and just map it out. Well, now you're going to have some significantly harder challenges that you'll face when you go to do that as a result of SB 567. AB 225, I won't talk about too much. I will tell you, it's the little environmental booklet that the government states you have to give to the tenants. Some new requirements in there. Just as a heads up, there's several opinions floating around that the new requirements for that booklet will actually expose landlords to greater liability. There's the potential for that. I don't really see that happening to the degree that others do, but I'm just giving you the code section so you can look it up. This one's really, really important. and I'm going to stop here for a second. AB 309. If you don't know what that is, it's called the Social Housing Act. The word social should tell you something right off the bat. All right. Here's where I'm going to stop and take a little bit of a detour. Over the last 17 years I've been practicing, I've been telling people, hey, just be aware the government wants your buildings. And a lot of my clients have thought I was absolutely nuts. I've told them that there's a socialist movement going on in this country. They've thought I was really nuts. And now a lot of my clients come to me and say, how did you know that? How did you see that this was going in this direction? And it was because I sat on the legislative committees, and I could see what was taking place. AB 309 is a socialist law. It is designed to take taxpayer money and they say building, but they also in the law is the word buying. They are building and buying multifamily properties to house the low, very low and moderate income people. And this is not a hidden agenda of the government. They want to own properties. So keep that in the back of your mind when we start going through this and you start asking yourself, why is the government passing all of these incredibly burdensome laws? What about my private property rights? What about my rights as a landlord? How come they keep making this harder and harder for me to own and operate residential rental properties? And as Chris alluded to when he said, I'm going to talk to you about economies of scale, one of the questions that Chris has asked me on a regular basis every time I'm at this luncheon is, where do you see this stuff going? And I say openly to you guys, and this is why I said some of you should not be real estate investors. You should take these laws into consideration and ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Can I do this? And you may have to take a hard look in the mirror, and you may come to the conclusion that this is not for me anymore. I can't do this. I need to look at different avenues. But the point is, the laws are intentionally designed right now to make this stuff difficult for you. The government, and it's not just the state of California, I'll talk about that in a second. The federal government is getting involved in this now too, and on a big scale. But the government does not like private property rights. They do not like private property ownership, and they do not like you building wealth using private property rights. So what's going to happen over time is they are making it more and more difficult for you to run your properties. And as Chris mentioned, the economies of scale. Where do I see this going? Well, you're going to fall on one of two sides of this scale. You're going to fall on selling because the administrative hoops and the rent control and the just cause and the targets on your back are just too much. It's not worth it. You could go to another state and do better. Or you're going to end up buying more because economies of scale work. So that you would use that second pillar, growth, 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 growth. Or you're going to look up and say, this is crazy. This stuff's nuts, like my wife and I did, and say, forget California, we're getting out of here. So getting out of here on a real estate investment level. So again, with that in mind, and that as the background, check out AB 309, the Social Housing Act, and read it very well. AB 524. Now this one may sound innocent enough, but let me play it out for you. AB 524 is a Family Caregiver Act. Sounds good, right? We need family caregivers. Well, what it's doing is the assembly person who's put this forward wants to give caregivers the status, a protected class status. In other words, you won't be able to discriminate against caregivers. Well, who wants to discriminate against caregivers anyway? We don't care. I mean, nobody's out there trying to discriminate against a caregiver, right? Let me extrapolate. What it really means is they want to give caregivers occupancy rights in your unit. So in other words, let's say my father has a caregiver and my father goes into a care facility or hospice. We don't know how long he's going to be in hospice. We don't know if he's coming out of hospice. Guess what? You can't get rid of your caregiver now because they have a protected class status. And to do it would be discrimination. And you would have a big target and a lawsuit on your back. So that's one you should take a look at. AB 548, I won't go into too much detail on that, except it's expanding the rights of municipalities to inspect your properties. And if a tenant calls in a complaint, hey, I'm number 3. Can you come look at this? The inspector gets in unit 3 and says, you know what? I don't like what I see in unit 3. I think I want to inspect every unit on this property. This law gives them the right to do that. And it puts the burden on you to get them into the other units. So again, putting responsibilities on you that really don't belong on you. AB 1317 is something called unbundled parking. Now this one actually to me makes a little bit of sense. This assembly person is trying to unpack parking from your leases. And it's a fantastic idea. We've been suggesting that since 2017, take parking out of your leases. If your tenants want parking, they should do it on a separate agreement. And why do I say that? Rent control. If parking is not part of the lease, there's no cap on raising your parking fees, is there? But there is a cap on your rent, isn't there? So parking can get really expensive. While we're on that topic, other components that you may want to unbundle or at least consider, laundry. Who pays the utilities? Most of the time, the landlord. Water, right? At least water most of the time. License your laundry rooms for your new tenants. Get a key code or a key slide, a fob, whatever it's called. You see where I'm going with this? Any amenity that you could unbundle from the lease itself should be unbundled so that you have a strategy for continuing to offset the increase in, for example, utility fees, things of that nature. SB 267. Now this is where we start getting a little strange. This one says that if a housing provider, let me get the exact name. Well, let's just call it housing. How many of you take Section 8? Raise your hand if you take Section 8. How many of you do not take Section 8? Raise your hand. Yes, you do. You don't know that yet, but you do. Because in 2020, it became illegal for you to tell people, I don't take Section 8. Why do you think the government passed that law? Because a lot of people are going to be on Section 8 in a few short years. And so they don't want you with the ability to say I don't contract with the government, I don't take Section 8. Who here remembers the 2016 election and this is not, I don't care who the parties were, but Hillary Clinton was walking around talking about a fair living wage, the living wage that everybody should get a check for $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Do you remember that? Okay, that's back in play. And it's part of that is the voucher program, Section 8, VASH vouchers, veterans vouchers, any sort of a voucher program. So this law that I was just talking about, SB 267, it says that if the government screens the applicant and says that the applicant is qualified, you will no longer be able to run your own credit report. Think about that for a second. So what the government is doing at that point is screening your tenants for you. And they've reduced your security deposit amount that you're permitted to take. And many of you may remember the city of LA last year didn't pass yet. It was tabled. It's coming back. The city of LA last year played with the idea of telling landlords they are not permitted to use credit reports for screening. What? So how do I decide what tenants, applicants I accept as tenants? You don't. We'll do it for you. That's what this law is about. So I got one more. I want to talk about some constitutional amendments. I'll just talk about one. There's a constitutional amendment that was put forward that is promoting housing is a fundamental right. Now, if you're a history major or poli-sci major, you probably know what that means. A fundamental right. It means a right given to you by God. It's based in our Constitution. There is no fundamental right. There is no housing that's a fundamental right. Housing is just like food. When does it get to the point where we say food is a fundamental right? So all supermarkets are going to be run by the government and the food will be distributed by the government. Anybody here from any sort of Soviet bloc country? Does this sound familiar? All of this sounds familiar. So my point to you is this. If you thought 2023 laws were hard, wait till 2024. A lot of the bills that didn't even pass are coming back in 2024 for the new legislative session, and they're not going to be fun. And that's why I'm asking you guys to take a hard look at your position as an investor, a residential investor in Southern Cal or California, anywhere, and ask yourself, okay, is this really for me? Do I have the ability to trade up and grow on that second pillar? I don't know. That's an internal decision you guys need to make. But if you needed some more information to help you make that decision, let me go through a few other things, emerging and developing trends. How many of you are familiar with what's called the right to counsel? Anybody? It typically pops up in a criminal setting. Under the Constitution, it says that if you are charged with a crime, you have a right to an attorney. Well, the LA County, not the city, the county of Los Angeles, has now put this program in play in the county. And what it says, amazingly, is if you have an eviction filed against you, you have a right to an attorney. So I want that to bounce around in your head for a second. One, who do you think is funding that? You and every other taxpayer out there, and me, and Chris, and Gil, everybody, Steven Spear, everybody that you look at who's paying taxes is funding the attorneys for the tenants now. Two, I can tell you that within the last 6 months, the number of tenants' rights attorneys has exploded everywhere. Why? Because they're doing a right to counsel. The attorneys are no longer paid by their clients. They are paid by the government, who's taking that money from you. Some of it is do you guys all know what I mean if I talk about the mansion tax? It's the tax that says if your property sells for more than $5 million, you get this amazingly fun bonus tax on top of all your other taxes. Well, it's being funded by that as well as your normal taxes. So one of the several of the laws that are being bantered around up in Sacramento are designed to reduce the number of votes necessary to increase your taxes from a 2/3 majority to 51%. Why are they doing that? Because they want to raise your taxes without a fight. Why do they want to raise your taxes without a fight? To fund all these socialist programs. And I'm intentionally calling them socialist because that's what they are. The Social Housing Act. All right. Okay, so you got right to counsel. If you thought your evictions were expensive, and let me talk about that for a second. A decade ago, the average eviction cost about $1,500 to $2,000. That was if it was contested and I had to go do a trial. The average eviction today, if I have to do a trial, is going to run you about $3,500 to $5,000. That is nothing compared to what evictions are going to cost you in a short while. The typical eviction, I can see it easily going up to 10 grand. And if you have to go do a trial, right now, your average jury trial is going to run you about $25,000 to actually, that's on the low end. To actually conduct a jury trial is going to run you about $25,000. My highest, I don't say it in a glib way, but my highest costing jury trial is $65,000. Now we won, and it made a big difference, and it penciled for the client for a lot of reasons, but $65,000 is not chump change to get rid of a tenant. And that's the goal. The government does not want you getting rid of tenants anymore. They are going to make your decisions for you. They are going to screen your tenants for you. They are going to cap the amount of rent that you can charge. They are going to make your life miserable. They're going to enact what we call just cause ordinances. Many of you know it as rent control. That's the umbrella phrase everybody uses, rent control, rent control. Rent control is governed by Costa-Hawkins, and there are limits to rent control. Just cause limits the rent control, as its name implies, caps the amount you can raise the rent. But there are limits to it. Just cause is not governed by any law, and any city can put any restriction they want, virtually any restriction, on evictions. They do not want people being evicted. Now, I want to share a number with you just so you can see, in a sense, why. In Stanley Mosk Courthouse, one courthouse alone in LA County, as of August 1st, there were over 12,500 active evictions going on. That's one courthouse. Why are all of those active evictions going on? While the economy on some levels looks like it's great, looks like it's roaring, and there's reasons for that, by the way. Part of that is a significant labor shortage. You guys should look up labor shortage and see if I'm accurate in my statements to you. But you should then look up, well, how does the labor shortage impact our economy? On the one hand, it creates inflation, and it makes it look like we have this roaring economy, but we don't. We have a significant number of people that are not working. And a lot of it, a surprisingly high number of it, is by choice. In fact, there's a book called Men Without Work. It was written a few years ago. And the number of adult working age people who have chosen to no longer look for work is unbelievable. It's crazy. But on top of that, we have places shutting down. We have a shaky economy. So the bottom line is we have a lot of people that aren't contributing to society. We have a lot of people that if it weren't for their parents letting them live with them, they would be homeless. And so there's this big homelessness push, especially in Southern California, up in San Francisco as well, Oakland. But that is the genesis of all of these social programs. And there's a lot more to it. I only have 4 minutes left, but I can't go into a tremendous amount of details. But I want to do a real quick poll. If you have never heard of Klaus Schwab, raise your hand. Okay. For those of you with your hand raised, please write that name down, and it's with a K. K-L-A-U-S, Schwab, like Charles Schwab, S-C-H-W-A-B, Klaus Schwab. If you have never heard of the World Economic Forum, please raise your hand. Oh, see, a lot fewer people raised their hand. Well, let me share with you that Klaus Schwab he started it, and he runs the World Economic Forum. And it wasn't long ago, and again, fact check me. Go online and look this stuff up. Klaus Schwab is very famous now for a video that he put out. You guys know that every year the World Economic Forum meets in Switzerland at a city called Davos. If you're not aware of that, you should check out these meetings. It's been on the internet a lot in the last few years. He's very famous for a couple of years ago saying openly, you will own nothing and you will be happy. That should tell you everything you need to know. These guys that are members of the World Economic Forum they're not in this room, I guarantee it. I don't care how upper class you might be or what your net worth is in this room. The guys attending the World Economic Forum in Davos are not sitting here today. They are on a whole different level. They are on a whole different playing field. As globalism took over, you can make this leap with me, but again, fact check me if you think I'm wrong. What's driving all of this stuff is a drive for socialism, communism under one, I know it sounds crazy, but one form of government. All right, one world government. And if you want to do some fun research, look up Agenda 21, look up Agenda 30. This all started in the 60s. It's all tied into your climate change. If you want to do something really fun right this moment, look up United States map, Agenda 21. All right, and then you will look at all of the red on that map, and you will see that that's where humans are not allowed under this agenda. Well, how are they going to accomplish that? Well, first of all, they have to take away private property rights. All right, so again, history major, political science major, none of it made sense until I got out into the real world and started doing research on this stuff. This is all a socialist drive to take away your property rights. Can it be fought? Yes, absolutely. How does it have to be fought? First, you have to know about it. And I've always taken a step back from going as far as I just went at these luncheons and in my seminars and webinars. Many of you know I do a lot of seminars and a lot of webinars. And I stopped bringing this stuff up about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago on purpose, because I would do these polls. I would tell people about this stuff. Then the very same people would come back to my next seminar and I'd do the poll again and nobody looked it up. So do yourself a favor, look up Klaus Schwab, look up the World Economic Forum, look up Agenda 21, look up Agenda 30, look up these laws I gave you. What you will see is your private property rights are being stripped. And economies of scale say the only people who are going to survive this are the guys who are growing. They keep buying more and more and more. Why? Because they can actually, most of you in this room are probably doing your own management. They can actually hire people to do the management. They can hire people to jump through these hoops. They can hire people to do all the administrative stuff correctly, all right? But many of you in this room can't. All right, I'm going to blow through this list because I have 10 seconds left. These are the upcoming trends in evictions. We've got right to counsel I talked about. Increased jury demands all over the place. I just told you tenants' rights attorneys have exploded. So have the jury demands. That's why I gave you the pricing. Federal involvement in evictions. You should start looking that up. Federal government, look up the federal government eviction control, all right? Increased rent control, increased just cause, anti-tenant harassment ordinances, backlogged courts, tremendous labor shortage. Los Angeles Superior Court is short 100 judges right now. So if you think you're going to get your eviction moved through the court quickly, you're not. Increased relocation fees by cities. Burbank, for example, right now is considering it. They're going to have a draft out in September. But through the roof relocation fees. LA City is $22,500 for a qualified tenant. If you've got properties, for example, under the Tenant Protection Act, which is California's rent control, and you have the opportunity to do a substantial remodel eviction, not all of you do, but if you can, now's the time to do it, right before the relocation fees match the city of Los Angeles while it still pencils. We talked about the labor shortages. We talked about the new laws for 2024. There are new fair housing laws that are coming out that are very onerous on landlords. Many of the cities now, for example, Pasadena, under Measure H, whenever you serve your tenant any sort of a termination notice, like a 3-day pay or quit, you have to put in the notice their right to a reasonable accommodation. Do you guys, if you do not know what a reasonable accommodation is, raise your hand. It's a fair housing requirement. And if you do not comply with the statute, your whole eviction is dead in the water. All right. So again, like I said, when I walked up here, if you thought Gil was being harsh, I did not bring any sunshine to your lives today, but I did bring a realistic picture. This is only going to get more difficult until one thing changes. And I don't see it changing anytime soon. Can you guys guess what the one thing that needs to change is? Sacramento. Whoever said that was right on the money. I really encourage you, get active. Go to your city council meetings. Figure out who your representatives are. Donate to them. Talk to them. Go up to Ledge Day. Get involved in your apartment associations. Contribute to your PACs. Get involved in the issues. I would venture to say most of you didn't know half the laws I just talked about today, and that's part of the issue. That's part of the problem. You guys have to become politically aware. And having said that, I am out of time. I apologize if I just made your day a little bit darker, but hopefully it'll give you some food for thought.
So the question is, can you as a landlord stomach the potential changes, the changes in the law and the emerging trends. It's something that you have to ask yourself. It's a conversation to have with yourself. No one can tell you or decide for you. But the reality of it is the glory days are gone. When most of everything was in a landlord's favor, the pendulum has swung the other way. Now, tenants seem to be getting the upper hand. You have to make a decision. Can you hang in there? Are you able to deal with these changes? And is this ideally where you thought you'd be at this point in your investment career? Stay tuned for part 2. Mike will rejoin us and actually discuss, well, which laws got signed into law, which laws were vetoed, and again, what is it that he sees on the horizon that you and I need to be aware of as multifamily investors. Until then, Chris German from the Apartment Dealer wishing you positive cash flow, tenants who behave, and much protection from Uncle Sam. Till next time.